Like most villains throughout history and media, there's a good chance that Scar didn't just become evil overnight. In fact, it probably took years to develop the intense anger and resentment that Scar felt toward Mufasa and his pride in the Lion King. If Scar had been manipulated by someone else, as some theories suggest, then he might have never even had a chance to be the good guy in his story. In a minute, I'm going to be exploring a theory that considers the idea of Scar possibly being brainwashed by his grandfather into becoming a villain. This theory takes a mixture of facts and information taken from the Lion King movies, TV shows, books, and even fan fiction, so it's worth noting that none of this should be considered 100% canon. As always, take everything in this theory with a grain of salt, and let's have some fun. Scar, like many antagonists before him, most likely wasn't born a villain. I think most Lion King fans can agree on that, so in order to really figure out his villainous origins, we have to take a look at his family tree, which might reveal some shocking information about the bloodthirsty lion. For instance, Scar might have been the son of an outlander. Now, I know that might be shocking information, and as I said before, this is all just a theory, but you can't deny that Scar being at least part outlander would explain the color of his fur and eyes. While Mufasa, Simba, and many of the other lions in the Pride Lands had reddish-brown eyes, Scar was more like Zira and the other outlanders who had green eyes. The main reason as to why some fans might believe that Scar was the son of an outlander is due to the lack of information about Scar and Mufasa's mother, Uru. She, much like Scar's father Ahadi, was never actually shown in The Lion King and was only briefly mentioned by Zazu in an interaction that he had with Scar in the first film. However, she was mentioned a bit more in the book series that was published after the first film, The Lion King: Six New Adventures. Throughout various stories, fans learned that Uru was a beloved queen and often went to great lengths to ensure the safety of her pride and the Pride Lands. Even then, though, the stories never really went into much depth of her or Ahadi's backstory, which has left a lot of speculation up to the fans. Interestingly enough, this speculation has actually led to some fan fiction backstories for Uru that surprisingly line up with not only what we know about the lioness, but what we know about her sons as well. According to one fanfic, Uru was the daughter of a selfish lion known as Choyo. Choyo is theorized to have been the adopted brother of Mohatu, who, according to canon, was the first great king of the Pride Lands and the grandfather of Mufasa. Because Choyo was the adopted member of the family, it automatically meant that Ahadi was the true heir to the throne, meaning that Ahadi likely received much more attention than Choyo did. Because of this, according to the theory, Choyo would have spent much more time in the Outlands, which is where the lion may have met Uru's mother. According to this theory, Uru kept to herself as a cub and really only cared about exploring. That is, until she met Ahadi. This is where Lion King canon comes into play, as Ahadi and Uru clearly fell in love and started a family together, because without them there wouldn't have been any Mufasa or Scar. As you know from the movies, Mufasa was the firstborn son, making him the heir to the throne, while Scar was the secondborn and given the name Taka by his family. Now, this is a heavily debated subject, as the word Taka in Swahili can either translate into the word waste or the verb want. So the question is, why does this translation matter? Well, as you might know from The Lion King, or maybe even The Lion Guard, or one of the many spin-off books set in the universe, Scar was treated much differently than Mufasa was when it came to their father. Depending on the meaning of Taka, Scar's original name could either be a symbol of how his father felt about him, or it could be that the lion was named for the way that he acted. You see, according to this theory, the name Taka was meant to be used as the verb to want, because Scar was believed to be a very needy and wanting cub. Meanwhile, Mufasa was very much like his father Ahadi and had the independence of a young king as well as natural leadership abilities. This would explain why in almost all versions of Scar's backstory, it's clear that Ahadi had a much deeper connection with Mufasa. Not only was he training the next king, but if this theory is true, then Ahadi would have seen a lot of himself in Mufasa, thus making the bonding a lot easier for them. Meanwhile, Taka would have been left out on a lot of their excursions and experiences. The interesting thing is that this theory even suggests that it might not have been Ahadi's intention to exclude Scar or to treat him differently. It was just that as a king, he would have been obligated to ensure the future king was raised properly. This also tracks with the Lion King novel, A Tale of Two Brothers. In the book, Ahadi was shown to care more for Mufasa while Scar was constantly trying to get his attention. It's a good thing for Scar that he had a mother who loved him and cared for him even when Ahadi was too busy. At least, that's how this theory sees it. If it's accurate, then Uru likely spent most of her time tending to Scar and raising him with the proper care that a mother should raise a child. But could Uru really stop Scar from becoming the villain that we all know him as? According to this theory, Uru did everything that she could to keep Scar grounded in reality and to help him feel just as much love as Mufasa did. However, she couldn't keep her eye on the lion at all times like she probably wanted to. According to A Tale of Two Brothers, Scar enjoyed spending time away from the Pride and the Pride Lands, which is actually how he managed to befriend a group of hyenas. I use the word befriend very carefully though, because at the end of the day, the hyenas were essentially Scar's minions, but when he was younger, I wouldn't be surprised if he actually found some companionship with them. More importantly though, if Scar did spend that much time outside of the Pride Lands, there's a good chance that he would have run into other lions. One in particular that comes to mind would actually be Scar's relative and Uru's father, Choyo. You see, according to this theory, after Ahati took over as the king of the Pride Lands, Choyo, who was adopted into the Pride, likely returned to the Outlands, where he, much like Scar, began devising a way to put his family on the throne. Because of Scar's similarities to the Outlanders, it stands to reason that Choyo would have seen something in Scar, much like how Ahati saw something in Mufasa. After introducing himself, Choyo likely would have revealed himself as Scar's grandfather on his mother's side of the family. From there, it wouldn't have been hard to convince the lion that his family was mistreating him and that with a few right moves, Scar might see himself on the throne. That being said, because Uru still had her influence on Scar, it's likely that he wouldn't have acted on these ambitions that Choyo may have been pressing into him, at least not while he had his mother's kindness still influencing him. Now, the big question is, with someone as attentive as Uru watching over him, how did Scar become so corrupted? Sadly, there's a good chance that the corruption didn't take place until after the death of Scar's mother, a time when he would have felt the most alone. As I said before, most of this is just a theory, but considering she wasn't shown in The Lion King, it's fair to assume that Uru had passed away at some point before the movie took place. According to this theory, Uru most likely died of old age, since that's the one thing that no being can fend off forever. With Uru and Ahati's eventual death, Mufasa would have become the king of the Pride Lands, which was shown in the original film. Meanwhile, Scar would have been left with nothing. The only family member that he believed actually cared about him had died, and his older brother was not in a position that he felt belonged to him. Well, if this theory is correct, then Scar would have returned to the Outlands that once provided him with comfort as well as the friendship of the hyenas. Only instead, he likely would have remembered the time that he possibly spent with Choyo. In the Outlands and under the influence of his memories, it wouldn't have taken much for Scar to be swayed to officially turn against his family. Considering that he was likely treated a lot like Scar was, at least according to this theory, Choyo likely would have passed on to Scar all of the unfairness that goes on among the Pride, really hammering in the fact that it was unfair for Ahati to treat Mufasa as if he was much better than Scar was. By this point, Scar likely would have come to the conclusion that the only way to be treated with respect and to make things right would be to become the king himself, which would mean betraying and usurping his own brother. Thus, the villain was born, and Scar's plot to take over the Pride Lands would begin. Now, there's no real way of ever knowing if this theory is true or not because there was no actual mention of Choyo in The Lion King, let alone any interactions that he may or may not have had with Scar. But I can see where the theory's coming from, especially after checking out the fan fiction about Uru that helped create it. What do you think, though? Was Scar's road to becoming a villain paved for him by the way that he was treated within his own pride? Or is there a chance that an outsider, like his potential grandfather Choyo, had a heavily negative influence on him? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.